At first I was afraid, I was petrified, kept thinking I could never live without you by my side. But then I spent so many nights thinking how you did me wrong, and I grew strong. And I learned how to get along, and so you're back from outer space. I just walked in to find you here with that sad look upon your face. I should have changed that stupid lock. I should have made you leave your key. If I'd had known for just 1 second you'd be back to bother me. Oh, now go, walk out the door. Just turn around now, 'cause you're not welcome anymore. Weren't you the one who tried to hurt me with goodbye? Did you think I'd crumble? Did you think I'd lay down and die? Oh no, not I will survive. Oh, as long as I know how to love, I know I'll stay alive. I've got all my life to live, and I've got all my love to give, and I'll survive. I will survive. Hey, hey. Hey. I'm Jessica Disbrow, licensed social worker and registered psychotherapist in the state of Colorado. I'm also the founder and primary therapist of Higher Consciousness Healing. We're a small private practice in Lakewood, Colorado, offering mental health services to youth and adults. For more information about our practice, please visit us on the web at www.higherconsciousnesshealing.org. Right now you're watching our live video blog where we talk about different mental health topics from a spiritual and scientific perspective. So welcome to the show. Please feel free in the audience to ask questions, comments during the show. There's a little bit of a lag time on Facebook Live, so definitely feel free to ask anything as it comes up, and I'll do my best to answer. Today's show, are you playing the victim? We're going to talk about victim and perpetrator dynamics. Because let's be real, we all play the victim. All of us. At some point in our lives, we've all played the victim. And why is that? It's really just human nature. It is. So when you think about the story of Adam and Eve, it's actually a really interesting example because it's really a story where everybody kind of plays the victim. You know, you have Adam and Eve in the garden and they're told not to eat from the forbidden tree. What does Eve do? She gets tempted by the snake, eats the apple, and then tempts Adam. Now, when God comes by and he's like, hey, what's up with this? You know, what does Adam do? He's like, it wasn't my fault. It wasn't my fault. I'm a victim here. It was her. It was her. And then what does Eve do? She's like, no, it wasn't me. No. That snake, he did it. It was Lucifer, evil temptress or tempter, you know, not my fault at all. So even in like our first biblical story, we have some people playing the victim. So it really goes back, I believe, to our basic survival instincts. It's a really easy way to get what we want. In some cases. It really does work against us in the long run, but some cases it's used for manipulation, and other cases we end up becoming so victimized by things in our life that we just kind of keep playing that out. You know, so we're playing the victim in order to survive and on a lot of levels. And many of us are playing the victim because there's always something to play the victim about. Like, we're victims of something, all of us. And so there's always a reason, there's always an excuse to kind of play that up when we're not doing our best. You know, and then add trauma and hardships and like poverty and all of that stuff. It's just a recipe for really bad news. I mean, we have people in bad situations all over the planet, you know, and it's really easy for us to say it's the government's fault, it's the school's fault, it's the criminal justice fault, it's whoever, you know, needs to fix gun laws, it's their fault, we just need to tighten these things up. You know, and we kind of get into this bad pattern of it's everybody else's fault. So that's also not good. So it's really important to get rid of that stigma, because we all play the victim, and it's all just about recognizing what we're doing, recognizing it in each other, finding a place of love and forgiveness, and moving on. Because we really need to help ourselves if we're in that victim state and we find ourselves continually being victimized, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. It's just really important to help ourselves. As I covered in last week's episode, we really have a very limited perception of what's going on, and our brain is also primed to expect and see things that have already happened to us. So if we're used to being the victim and people are taking advantage of us a lot, we're now going to expect a world where people take advantage of us. And now that kind of just perpetuates in this terrible cycle. So what's really happening when we play the victim? Well, I'm going to break it down. In really plain English, what's happening when we play the victim is we're blaming others, circumstances, events, etc., for our negative thoughts, emotions, behaviors, and so on. So kind of like, he made me do it, and it's just, it doesn't really work out for us in the long run for a variety of reasons. Victims often feel like life is happening to them, and they don't have any power or control to do what they need to do to make the changes and have a better life for themselves. And again, it's usually because people have had real life victimhoods, let's be real. Again, we're all a victim of something. So it's about owning that and recognizing that being in a victim state, it's really a state of mind. Again, with that brain being primed for that victim stage now. So it's when other people do bad things to us, it's only a reflection of them. It's not a reflection of us. And this is where victims get really confused, because they're like, well, this person made this horrible act against me, and now I'm having to deal with that, and it's your fault, you terrible perpetrator. Like, why did you do this to me? And, in some respects, yes, right? No one should ever be hurting anybody, speaking rudely, getting upset. Really, like, a lot of the negative interactions we have are just totally unnecessary and unhealthy. So when people act out like that, that's a reflection of them. It's not a reflection of us. So if we happen to be in the way of somebody's anger or attack, whatever they do is on them. It's their responsibility. However, the same goes for us as the victim in that situation. Whatever we do is our responsibility. Some people fight back. Some people go into a state of disassociation because of trauma, and they can no longer control what's happening after that. It's a very scary place to be. So it's all about recognizing our place and our role in these different dynamics. As victims often tend to personalize their perpetrator's actions, and they think it's their fault. They think it's because we did something wrong. And again, it has more to do with them than it does us. However, because so many people have been victimized, it's just really normal to play the victim. Again, it's really, really human nature. I think kids tend to play the victim until they kind of learn to take responsibility and grow up. And many of us as adults are playing the victim and not taking responsibility. So it's not really your fault, because you're just perpetuating the patterns that were plugged into you growing up. And that's just kind of how your brain is wired right now. So really, if that's your deal, it's really going to be okay. It is our responsibility ultimately to learn from those experiences and not to let them repeat. So when people are hurting us, we need to take a look and say, okay, what is this person really doing in my life? Is this a good relationship? And, is this something I want to be a part of? If people are hurting you often, it's a really good time to take a look at yourself and say, how am I treating me? Am I being good to myself? Am I taking care of all of my needs? Am I loving myself the way I want to be loved? Those kind of things. Because I would argue almost always the reason why people are treating us badly is because we're treating ourselves badly. And then we think it's okay for others to treat us badly when it's not. And then we make excuses for them hurting us because we care about them and we kind of see their perspective, and it gets all messed up. So start treating yourself better. Ask other people to treat you better too. Put those boundaries in. It's a really, really healthy thing to put boundaries in. I know that we care about people, and unfortunately people are in a bad state and they act out, they get upset. And even though we can understand where they're coming from and we understand they're in a weak moment, usually, of stress, it's still not okay to tolerate abuse, basically, and we need to put boundaries in place in those relationships. And if putting boundaries in place in those relationships makes the relationship more toxic and harmful, that's really the time that you need to go and do whatever you can. Ask for help, ask for support, family members, whatever you need to do. That's not good. Because everyone deserves to be treated well. Always. Yeah, I said always. Everyone. Well, I'm sure maybe you're asking, well, even perpetrators? I mean, aren't we throwing perpetrators in jail and being really pretty hard on them because they're causing crimes here, right? My answer? Yes. Even they deserve to be treated well and with respect and kindness and love. And why is that? It's because ultimately, perpetrators commit acts out of feelings of victimhood, because perpetrators are victims too. Now, I worked in the criminal justice system for quite a number of years. I worked with perpetrators and people who were locked behind bars, people who are supposedly bad for society and, a harm to themselves and others. And let me tell you, they're some of the biggest victims of all kinds of things that you could ever imagine. So really what we're doing is we're locking up victims who have now turned into a perpetrator because their feelings of victimhood are so strong that they're now trying to take action because they feel so victimized by the other person or group of people or whoever it is, and they feel they need to take action and stop this evil from happening. Well, that's all that's happening. Victims becoming perpetrators, making more victims, hurting people again and again. And barring on the occasional people who know they're doing wrong and don't care, I think those people are deeply unconscious. I would argue that most people are committing violent acts or other mean things, even saying curse words while you're screaming. Everybody gets upset and we yell at our partner and we call them a B, and we think that's normal, and it's actually just a lesser version of more extreme versions of this cycle of abuse. So it's really about us seeing that for what it is and taking responsibility, recognizing that perpetrators are really just victims trying to take their power back, and they're acting on their own reactions and triggers, and some of them even black out during these events. And they just have, very little cognitive functioning during that high time of stress. And they're just reacting like animals, essentially, because they're so traumatized. So, we've got to meet ourselves where we're at and each other, because we're all victims of something. And it's up to us to learn to take radical responsibility for ourselves and our life and say no more. I don't want people to treat me like this anymore. I don't want to treat myself like this anymore. And things will really start to shift in your life if you're in that place. And again, it can be to various degrees. We can play the victim in very little ways that aren't really causing a lot of harm or dysfunction to ourselves or our relationships on the surface. But really, when we start digging deep, we realize that these are actually bigger problems we need to deal with. And on the more extreme end, you're looking at domestic violence and, cycles of abuse within families and a whole mess of stuff. So it's all about love and understanding, asking for the help that we need, and finding forgiveness for ourselves if we have been the victim and perpetrator, because usually we're both. Yeah, that's usually how that works out, especially when we knowingly put ourselves in a position where we have the potential to be abused, and we do that over and over again, knowingly, we know that they could hurt us. We then kind of become our own perpetrators because we're putting ourselves in that situation. And even though it's not okay for that person to ever hurt us, we need to maybe make some different decisions with our life. So all we can do is take radical responsibility. I really recommend that if you're interested in learning more about that, check out episode 10 on adulting. It's a really good one. All right. Next week, we're going to be talking about narcissism and gaslighting. What are those two things? I mean, there's a lot of people who feel victimized by narcissists. So if you're in that category, this kind of loops into the victimhood topic we covered today. And then gaslighting is a really sneaky form of manipulation that people don't even realize they're doing. And it's kind of messing things up for people in relationships. So we're going to dive into that. All right, that about wraps up my show. If there's any last questions or comments, now would be the time to ask. And I'm just going to make a quick announcement. I've been shouting out for the spiritual support group for millennials that we have coming up. It's for ages 18 to 30. It'll be on Thursday, October 12th here in Lakewood, Colorado. And the foundation is really about education, peer support, and community building. So myself and Andrew, who's going to be my co-facilitator, he's going to be acting as a peer mentor, and it's going to be more of like a mentoring group. So it's not going to be anything like too heady or any like psychobabble. It's not a therapy group. It's really a community building and support group. So I really hope you can check us out. We're up on Meetup, so I'm going to leave the link in the description box for those of you who are interested. You can go to our page, sign up. It's $22, and let me know if that's a problem for you. I'd be happy to negotiate. It's one of our first groups, and I'm really here to create a space for young people to come together and share this journey, because it's a lot, and I think a lot of young people in their 20s are really going through some intense things with their families and with the way that everything is set up right now with our systems, and I'm really wanting to create a space to support that with Andrew, my co-facilitator, who I'm really jazzed is going to be joining us. He's really great. He's 27 and he has a lot of wisdom in him and has some peer mentoring experiences from the past. It's going to be a really great match, so I hope you can join us. Again, go to our Meetup page. It's the spiritual support group for millennials, and I'll leave that description up in the box. All right, thank you so much for watching. Oh, you know what? I have a question, so let me read this. And oh, yes, I know. It's intense. So the question says, perpetrators of abuse should be treated nicely. And they say, I'm sorry, I can't stomach that. So it really goes back to that forgiveness piece. No, I'm not saying that you should put yourself in the line of someone who's being harmful. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying like, go around and treat perpetrators nicely because they're victims too and they just really need a hug. That's definitely not what I'm saying. And that is a really good, I'm really glad that you bring this up, because it is really important for us to have good boundaries around people who are in that kind of state. So people who go on to move from the victim state to the perpetrator state are really not in a good mental place. They're not. And if for the, people who are on the other side of that and you're watching, it's a lot. I had some concerns shooting this show because it does bring up issues for people, and it's hard to grasp concepts of deep forgiveness when people have been really harmful to us. So again, people who are harmful to us, we need to put up appropriate boundaries and do what we need to do to protect ourselves. But ultimately, to show love and kindness to everyone, even if we don't do that like in person, even if we just do that for ourselves. And that's some of the work that we do as trauma survivors to overcome what that other person did to us. So it is kind of a jump. We do need to expand our mind a little bit and wrap our head around why someone is being a perpetrator and what they're really doing, and the kind of like you have to understand like the way that their brain is functioning when they're in that state. Parts of their brain are shutting down because they can no longer access that because they're so stressed out, because they're basically like very, very traumatized in a lot of cases. And so when you're in that state, it's hard to say it's just one aspect of that person that's showing up right then. It's not the whole person. It's just a behavior that's coming out that's nasty and mean, and stay away from it, But if you are involved in a relationship with someone who isn't being so nice to you and you're trying to work that out, I really would recommend that you seek professional counsel, couples counseling and that kind of thing, because it can get really messy, and obviously wouldn't want to give you any advice without knowing your full story. And I try not to give too much advice anyway, because ultimately we have to make those decisions for ourselves and what's right and wrong. And you don't have to listen to me at all. You can say like, I'm not going to be nice to perpetrators. Like that's totally fine. I'm just trying to spread a different perspective and opinion that's based more in love and forgiveness. And this is a spiritual channel as well with the science. So I'm trying to bring it all together as well as I can. And I really appreciate the question and comment, because it is a really important piece. All right. I don't see anything else, so I'm going to wrap up today. Please feel free to leave any questions, and we'll see you next week. Thanks a lot.